Today's episode, well, I don't think we've done anything like this before in the 4+ years this show has been on. How to use psilocybin safely, whether you're using it as a microdose or even a larger dose. What are some of the things you can do to make sure that you're going to have a safe trip? Well, we're going to talk about this today. I've invited fellow Microdose U faculty member Dan the Man to share his wisdom about how to use psilocybin safely and effectively. Let's let Dan take it away, and I'll be back on the other side just to do a little short recap. Enjoy.
Enter the world of magic mushrooms with Microdose U.
Hey guys, I'm Dan. I'm in the Microdose U Patreon community and quite active in the WhatsApp chat as well. In my day-to-day life, I'm a medical provider and have had a lot of experience with psychedelics for my own growth, but also have worked in the space for a period of time. And so I kind of get to see the medical model versus community model, what things go well, what things might leave people in a little bit of a difficult state afterwards too. And I like to write on the side, mostly for my own amusement, and blend my worlds together of healthcare, science, creativity, etc. And I wrote an article recently called No Shortcuts about psychedelics and the importance of community and harm reduction. And Dr. Dave asked me to read it as an episode, but I thought it might even be better just to summarize it and go through it chunk to chunk, and then I can attach the article as well, because I don't like to hear the sound of my own voice reading the sound of my own words. So I'll get started and just summarize where things started. One thing I just wanted to highlight is a lot of the premise of this episode is based on what I've seen in working in the space, but also my own experience. Pitfalls, wins, what works, and what kind of feels like a trap. I like to use a lot of my own examples as don't do what I'm doing, but maybe do the lesson that I got out of it. So do what I say, not so much what I do. I, like a lot of folks who get involved with the space, probably initially got an interest because of the things that I'd been going through in my own life and feeling stuck. And one of the hardest traps being a healthcare provider is knowing all the avenues that exist and feeling defeated ahead of time when you see the statistics of the traditional mental health and healthcare model. And I think sometimes healthcare providers in particular know too much biology and fall into the trap of trying to over-science everything and fall into the trap of more is better. And as everyone finds out in different avenues, more is not better. Better is better, and better for you is different than better for somebody else. And so I just want to highlight the fact that maybe I do have a little bit of extra background knowledge in the science and medical space. That does not at all prevent me from falling into the same traps that anyone else falls into. One thing I want to get started off is just debunking the myth of a magic pill. This isn't just applying to psychedelics, this applies to really everything in the current capitalism model of healing. The weight loss medications, testosterone replacement, hormone replacement, they're all helpful tools. But I think the way that it's pitted is finding an individual's insecurities and weak spots, whether it be weight loss or fatigue or libido, or in this case, mental health, and proposing that this one thing is going to solve all your problems. And it can be an exciting thing to feel that way and get the momentum going, but it leads to a lot of false expectations. You're going to be let down a number of times along the way. And then you're going to feel like you failed because the message was take this, feel better, and you're not going to feel better. And it's going to happen 100% of the time. You might get little chunks of time where you feel better, but healing is, and you'll figure it out in your own way along the way, is it's a roller coaster, it's a sine wave, there's ups, there's downs, and even when you're at the top, there's going to be another down again, and it's the lessons that you learn along the way. Thinking about psychedelics as a guide in your healing journey rather than a god is probably the best way to go. It's a molecule that kind of shines a flashlight into your psyche and maybe brings some increased perceptual and somatic awareness to your environment, as well as some bodily cues that you might have, like jaw tension or shallow breathing, sweating, things that during the day you might feel as a sign of stress. But because you're in that state of stress, and not able to get back into your body, it's hard to recognize it for what it is. And psychedelics do definitely help with that. They highlight some awareness to things that might have been hiding underneath the surface. And a reference that I made in my article is that what they will do in terms of your mental health is they'll increase the spotlight on those dark, shadowy parts of your psyche that are hiding in the moldy basement, the childhood traumas, the shame, the guilt, things that you just, parts of yourself that you don't want to bring to the surface and necessarily identify with. And they will expose you to those things. And being exposed to them is probably one of the most transformative healing processes, but it does require action. It requires not just looking at them, but sitting with them, processing them, and then making the changes on the back end to help take those boxes out of the basement, bring them to the first floor, and then go through them and do a little bit of a purge as though you were moving. And I think with the fast-paced nature of our world, everything is, I feel this way, I want to feel better, I'm going to get this thing delivered to my door in 2 days, and I better feel better in 3 days. It's the Jeff Bezos, Amazon Prime phenomenon, instant gratification, and that goes well beyond psychedelics. That goes in, I think you could probably highlight most things in our lives, myself included, where even just waiting in line at a grocery store, if it takes more than 2 minutes, we get a little angsty. Think about if you're thinking about doing a larger psychedelic journey or even just like an intentional microdose, the way to frame it is kind of like the leg day of working out. It's the thing that people skip most of the time, is the work afterwards in psychedelics. Leg day is typically the hardest. It's the largest muscle group. It requires the most energy. And because of that, it's painful and a drudge. And so people skip it. And they miss out on probably 75% of the benefits of exercising in general when you skip the largest, most important muscles in your body. So what psychedelics do, to varying degrees, LSD, psilocybin, DMT, all work in different ways, but ultimately are tapping into something called the default mode network in your brain. So it's like the little bureaucrat in your brain that organizes your ego, your sense of self, your thought patterns, creates a structure in your life. From the moment we're born, our ego starts developing based off of trauma patterns, societal conditioning, things that our parents pass down to us as normal behaviors. And the more that those get emboldened into our psyche, the more that thinking outside of that framework gets difficult. So it keeps us stuck in this rigid, self-critical railroad track where those thoughts of I'm not good enough, or I hate the sound of my voice, or I wish my nose wasn't so big, or if I just lost these 15 pounds, or I'm turning out just like my parents. It's the self-chatter that's constantly going on that drives a lot of our actions, and we almost become autonomous in the way that we go through life. When you take a psychedelic, that kind of fades away, and what would otherwise be almost like a cement structure loosens up, becomes more of a wet cement, and opens this thing called the therapeutic window. And that's where a lot of the neuroplasticity discussions are on, where there's this period of time where your brain actually has the capacity to make some new connections. So during the trip, whether it's a positive experience like awe, oneness, feeling love, feeling connected to nature, or on the back end having a really quote-unquote bad trip where dark stuff comes up, fear, pain, resentment, shame. And I do want to highlight too that a bad trip is not a bad thing. In fact, having had quite a number of both, the bad trips are honestly the ones that afterwards in the aftermath probably created the most transformation. In the moment, it's hard, and that's why I'll highlight some things in a little bit as to why there's some structure and framework that's required to not completely destabilize yourself in those situations. So yeah, going through a trip, in the moment, regardless of what you're experiencing, there's going to be the post-trip. So nobody can stay in the trip forever. It would be destabilizing and impossible. And so it's not the trip that's healing you. It's after you come back to land, you're in that, depending on the psychedelic, multiple week to sometimes multiple month period of increased neuroplasticity. There's something called integration, which gets tossed around a lot, but it's basically taking all the things that you experienced, felt, all the insights, and trying to find a way to replicate that in normal life without medicine. So what are some actions you can do to ensure that your life might fit the ideal life that you experienced. So just kind of laying out some groundwork on that. There is the idea of set and setting, which is basically just like shorthand for mindset and then the environment that you're going to be in. So set and setting, the mindset portion is just how you're going into the trip. What are you thinking about? How you feeling? What's your psychological state? What were the days leading up to the trip? Were they chaotic, or did you kind of prep for it? Were you off of work and just relaxing a little bit to get your nervous system down? And then the other part is, why are you doing this? Are you doing a more of a macrodose to work on some healing, or to let the mushrooms, etc., show you some areas that you might have some blind spots for? Or are you at a festival and your main intention is just to see some cool colors and get fucked up? And that's not a bad thing. I think recreational experiences, especially with good friends, have their own healing portion to them in terms of connection to others and just being free in your body. But I think if you're going in thinking it's going to be some cathartic insta-cure for your depression, you got to know that what comes out is what you put into it. A lot of times people skip this because really the pre-work is the hard part. And so I think if you think about going into a trip like you would go to bed, there's this whole talk about sleep hygiene and the fact that we're exhausted at the end of the day, but we're so ramped up that we just expect to lay down on the pillow and fall asleep. But you have to prepare your body to be in sleep mode. So it's dimming the lights, turning your screens off, taking a shower, reading a book, just calming yourself back into that state. Going into a trip is similar. You want to get your body prepared for what could come up, what you want to come up, how you'll feel if that doesn't come up, so that whatever happens, you're open to it and able to get through it. Then there's setting, which is your environment, where you're going to be doing it, in your house, out on a nature trail, at a retreat, who's going to be there, is it a familiar place, do you know where bathrooms, blankets, water, all of those things are, or are you at a festival? Is there a friend that's going to be hanging out with you who is a friend, might take advantage of the fact that you're in a certain state and kind of razz you a little bit, and which could amp up your anxiety? Or are you having a trip sitter come over, or is your trip sitter your spouse, but maybe that spouse is judgy and skeptical of psychedelics, and you might feel a little on edge, like you have to please them a little bit? Or on the flip side, are you snuggled up on your couch with a warm blanket by a fireplace, with your dog, your cat at your feet, your partner's available, no strings attached, or you have a friend available via phone or text who you could call really anytime, just knowing that you've got a safe space available? Because you're about to do a macrodose at a rave with 20,000 people, it's going to be an experience for sure, but it's probably not the healing type that you're anticipating it's probably going to be, because the setting going into it is more chaos than it is peace. Ideally, you want soft lighting, nature, curated music, something relaxing. There's a lot of playlists on Spotify these days. And honestly, I usually recommend not having any lyrics in the music that you're listening to. I think we can get caught up in the lyrics, which is somebody else's story, and kind of get hijacked into that frame of reference. And you just kind of want something to guide the sensory component of it, but you want your mind to be the thing that's driving the trip. And I think sometimes lyrics can pull us out of that. And so having music and comforts nearby, and then a safe, trusted person who is either physically present or easily available via phone it's like an anchor. So if, God forbid, something happens during the trip where you have a big psychological experience, that anchor is basically going to help you reground yourself, help you recognize that this is just a temporary experience, which can be the difference between having a breakthrough or honestly sometimes even having a breakdown, where coming out of it you're even a little bit more traumatized. And so again, I want to highlight the fact that I'm saying these things, and they're mentioned in a lot of psychedelic circles, but I've made these mistakes so many times that at 100% I'm telling you that this will happen at some point if you do skip a lot of the work. And that's okay if it does. There's no shame in it too. Just more of an educational aspect of, if these things happen, we can reflect back and say, okay, I didn't go into that with the best intention. When people skip it routinely and they're just doing constant large doses, always chasing the psychedelic state, it can trigger something called spiritual bypassing, which is basically just skipping the hard part and getting to the conclusion and using a lot of fancy, fluffy words to, frankly, avoid dealing with real, dirty, raw emotions of being a human. If someone goes in and has that experience of oneness where everything's connected, but then they come back and everybody that they interact with is deemed unenlightened, or they come back and feel that oneness in the trip and come back and don't feel the need to really pay attention to the mundane things about being in a physical presence, like paying bills or treating their spouse properly or being present with their kids. I've seen, and I'm sure you probably have seen and heard some of the folks out there, since the space is growing, these new wave shamans and all different parts of the country where they're talking on podcasts and it's all an illusion, man. Maybe it is, but a lot of times that's a way for them to avoid just not being a jackass in the real world. So if you come back and all that empathy during the trip evaporates, you come back and you don't reflect that back to the people that you're interacting with, then the God that you think that you might have found during that trip probably wasn't God. It's probably just your ego putting on a nice shiny new costume, which it does like to do. The whiplash effect of evaporating your ego, your ego will always come back. It's part of us. We can't kill our ego. We can dissolve it temporarily and open the channels, but it's going to come back. And you want to create a merge between your ego and your true self. And sometimes if you don't have that awareness of it, if you destroy the ego too intensely and then it comes back with a whiplash effect where it's more emboldened. It got a taste of, oh man, this could happen to us. And so it clamps down even harder, makes you a little bit more rigid, a little bit more edgy, a little bit more anxious. And just mentioning these things because I've been there and I want to hopefully make my mistakes and add some of the medical background to it and keep people from having to go through the same thing. Another thing that can happen when you're just bombarding your brain with too many chemicals without the work on the back end is the default mode network is something, again, like the ego, that it's part of us, like we can't exist without it. But when you do dissolve it, you need to come back and ground yourself back into the world. And when you don't do that or you do psychedelics too frequently, the worlds start to blur. It's something called derealization. I feel like almost like you're a character in a movie where nothing really matters, or we're all stardust. Basically, everything starts to feel ethereal, like nothing matters. And maybe there is some truth to that to some degree, but it can really change the way that you show up in the world and cause a lot of harm if you're not aware of it. And what I wanted to highlight a little bit more on is how do you integrate, or what does that mean? Because it can be something different for everyone. Integration can be just feeling some physical somatic release during your trip, or relaxation of the jaw, slowing down of your breathing, lack of chatter in your brain, and then saying, okay, what was I feeling during that time? And then when you're not using the substances on an off day or you're just taking a break, finding some tools to replicate the feeling that you had. Not the high sensation that you had, but okay, during that period, yes, I was in the psychedelic state, but I felt peace, I felt love, I felt relaxation, I felt the tasks of the day didn't matter. How can I replicate that? Could it be 10 minutes in the morning of box breathing or meditation or a walk, or having a boundary at your lunch hour at work and saying, you know what? For 15 minutes, I'm leaving the building and going for a walk. For a lot of us people pleasers, especially for empathetic, which I think most people in this group probably can relate to, is we might be like the dumping grounds for everybody else. We absorb everyone else's shit. And we might have a friend or a relative who just constantly dumps problems on us. On that back end, they will never ask about our lives. They'll never listen. And an integration tool could just be setting that boundary and saying, hey, listen, I'm here to support you, but this is a lot for me to emotionally hold. And I'm not going to be able to be that person for you whenever you have a feeling pop up. And sometimes what feels like you're harming them is actually guiding them in a positive direction, but also creating some peace in your life. And again, integration can be meditation. It can be setting that boundary. It can be talking to your spouse about feeling like the load maybe isn't shared, and maybe cordially working through that together so everybody feels like they're having their own me time as well. I think one of the biggest things is just to make sure that after you have an experience that you don't make any big changes for a few weeks afterwards. So if you have a really transformative experience where you just are like, holy shit, so much of my life is fake and it's not how I want to live, I think that's amazing. But there's this period afterwards where it does take a little bit of time to recalibrate with life, and you don't want to quit your job, you don't want to break up with your partner or join a cult or become a Reiki shaman or sell your house and move to Costa Rica. Just let things settle for a few weeks. Neuroplasticity is an ongoing thing, and so if the insights that you experienced were true, and I'm sure a lot of them were, they're going to be true in a month. They're going to be true consistently. And I think letting things settle takes that reactionary approach of, much like the quick fix approach of just taking a pill of, it told me this, I'm going to do this now. And you want to be super mindful of your actions so that it feels more like it's coming from your soul and not from a reflex. And the last thing I wanted to highlight is community. And I think obviously the Microdose U community is one that I'm going to highlight the most here, because I've been, like I said, working in that psychedelic space, been involved with psychedelics for probably a decade. I've been in a ton of communities, probably at least a dozen, some very highly medically focused, some scientific and lots of lectures and things like that. And then others community-based, some local and some virtual. And they're all good. It depends what you're looking for, but I live in the science sphere almost every day in what I read about and in my work life. And I've seen what it can do, but I've also seen what it doesn't do. And what it doesn't do is it doesn't provide like a family community. It gives people a lot of information, but honestly, we are so jam-packed full of information these days that I find that can make people feel overwhelmed, like they're missing something, like they're failing, like they're not doing enough. And honestly, I think people are doing too much. And if you do feel like you've joined a group like that in the past and like you failed or whatever, you didn't. It's not how your body wanted to heal. That's not how a lot of people's want to heal. If you look back, psychedelics are historically have never been done in an isolationist manner. Everything's been infused in the cultures. They do it as a communal practice, part of their religious, part of their kind of development from adolescent to adulthood. They're basically just baked into the fabric of the DNA of the tribe. And when we do things in isolation, home therapy, home ketamine therapy, individual therapy, it's fine, it's good, and sometimes it's necessary for people to do their own work and then maybe bring it back to a group setting. But if we're stuck in that all the time, we're basically just a constant echo chamber. And community is important because it, one, normalizes things. If I were to talk to my wife, who's not as interested in psychedelics, not at all against them, just not personally interested, and try to describe a large macro journey that I had in the past, she would probably think I was batshit crazy. And so I don't really describe them to her. I might describe how I'm feeling. If you talk to someone like myself or someone in the group or someone in your life that's had similar experience and you have a community, that they're only going to echo back, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, or yeah, I had something similar. And it's going to make you feel more validated and help you work through things rather than try to hide the reality of what you experienced. It also does help prevent something called the mirror effect, which humans are notorious for having blind spots and missing them. I am frequently. When you're in a very supportive group, they might kindly reflect back to you when you're bypassing or spiritually bypassing, or even just acting like a jackass. To be frank, people come back from these psychedelic journeys with the biggest egos you would ever imagine. Not to get political, but Elon Musk slipping into his K-hole in the White House and losing his mind, that can happen. And he just really didn't have anybody probably in his space to check him and bring him back to earth. And so that's another aspect of community that's really important. And then the last thing is just having a safe container. Not every trip that you have is going to be beautiful and full of light and love. Some of them suck. They're full of blood and guts. You'll come out of it and be weeping. It'll be really a dark period in the couple hours after, but then it will fizzle out. And I think being in a community where when that's happening, they can help normalize that experience, you can share those difficult emotions, the terror, the existential dread, and get them out of your body and into words and kind of strip them of their power. Because healing's a team sport. We think the things that are happening in our lives are only happening to us. And if you're in this group, the Microdose U community on Patreon, you'll recognize that as soon as you share your story, someone else, probably at least a dozen other people, have a similar story. And I would bet you'll see one where you're like, oh my God, I thought I went through a lot. I don't know how this person's doing as well as they are. And that is healing. It creates a normalization of the predicament of human suffering. We're all human. We're all going to go through shit. We're all going to get through that shit. It's going to feel like we're not going to get through that shit. But the more you can witness that and help people through it, and then also be helped through it by others, the less in the future, when that happens again, you're going to feel defeated right off the bat. You're going to feel like you have the tools to get through it. And when you're doing psychedelics, it's not that life is never going to be difficult again. In fact, sometimes it actually gets more difficult, but it feels less difficult because you know that you've been through it and you know how to get through it. If I could summarize just some of the main points, and again, Dr. Dave's covered this and it's been chatted about in the group, but psychedelics are not a get-out-of-jail-free card. They're a magnifying glass, and they do require a lot of respect and some grounding and integration, and definitely some sort of community, whether it's locally or in a space like this. And it requires a lot of boring work. I work in the healthcare sphere, and people come in with injuries and want to see physical therapy to rehab them, and a lot of the physical therapists will say, if you've been having pain for 6 years, you can expect that it will take at least half that to completely get rid of your pain, because you're undoing all of these pathways. And psychedelics are similar. If you've had substance abuse or trauma patterning from like a PTSD situation growing up, that's what your body knows, and you can heal it, but it's a slow stripping away rather than a nuclear bomb. So yeah, the goal is not to be in the trip forever. The goal is to come back, be better, kinder, more present. If you come back and you're still an asshole to your spouse, still not present with your kids, and still not compassionate towards yourself, then the spaces that you enter on these trips, you're no more than a tourist. So, whether or not you're using psychedelics, or if you are, put down the map, get outside, go for a walk, talk to your neighbors, build a community of people that you want to be around and could be your container for an experience like this. Because I think all of us are empaths in some degree, but the healer part of you is not a version that just is going to come out automatically. You have to consciously choose every day to act on the things that you get out of these experiences, and the more that you do that, the more that your baseline is going to become what you felt during those times. And I hope that was not too much information. I tried to spare you of the word-for-word dialogue from the article that I'd written, but I hope you enjoyed. Be in the group and chatting frequently, so you can always ask specific questions. I'm just one person. I'm by no means an expert, and there's a lot of other folks with totally different experiences that greatly surpass mine in different areas. But I've been involved with it for quite a while, and I'm very fortunate to have worked in the space to get some perspective, and sometimes that's a good avenue. And for me, and I think a lot, it can be as simple as getting connected in the group with an avenue that feels comfortable for you, and just knowing that you've got access to all these people with different experiences at any time during the day. And so I look forward to chatting with you guys, and I will see you soon.
Hey, Dan, thank you so much. This was a fantastic episode, and if it's okay with you, we are definitely going to have you back. I want to make sure for everybody listening or watching that when Dan was referring to our Microdose U community, he was actually referring to our Patreon platform, a Patreon community, which is a paid group, but it's only $12.50 a month, and you're going to get community. You're going to get answers. We encourage you to join today. The link is always in the show notes and on my website, microdoseu.com. It's microdose with the letter U on the end of it.com. We're right here in the show notes wherever you're watching or listening. And I'm Dr. Dave. Cannot wait to see you on the next episode. And always remember, you're valuable. You matter a lot to all of us here at Microdose U.